Hi, friends and family,
Welcome to Hope After Addiction
with your host, Katie Comer.
and Chelsea McLeod.
Hi, friends. Welcome back to Hope After Addiction. We are so happy that you have joined us today. Chelsea, how are you?
I am great.
Good.
How are you doing?
Good.
Anything
Doing really
new?
good. Nothing new, but something new coming up.
Uh-oh.
Yeah, this weekend. My daughter is getting baptized.
Sweet Ella.
I know.
Aw.
She asked Jesus into her heart a few weeks ago. I don't know if we talked about it or not on the podcast.
we
Did we?
did,
Did we a
yeah.
little bit? So this weekend, so it hasn't happened yet, but by the time this gets released, we'll have pictures for you. And so we'll put up those pictures. Jorian will put those pictures up for you. And I can't wait. She can't wait.
Really?
Oh my goodness. She has a countdown. And it has been, we scheduled this a couple weeks ago. So she's been 14 days, 13 days, 12. So she is ready.
I love that. Who's doing it?
Well, Adam's going to be baptizing her.
That's what I was wondering.
So, but there's always like a pastor that comes up before. I'm not sure who that'll be
Yeah.
up front, but
So
Adam will baptize her. She's my little warrior, warrior. She's also a warrior, but she's a worrier.
I love that.
So she has all this stuff in her mind of like, what do I sit? How do I sit? What if I fall in? What if it splashes too much? What if my face going to look like? I'm like,
Precious.
just be in the moment.
Yeah.
Daddy will be there with you. You're fine. So it's funny.
It's going to be so sweet.
I know. I can't wait to show you pictures. I'm sure it'll be beautiful.
Yeah.
Eli's pictures were so good. It's such a great moment. So
Yes.
as a parent, this is what we prayed for 9+ years, or even like while we were trying to have kids,
Yeah.
is just them accepting the Lord and them being a part of the family. And I remember when Ella accepted Adam was like, "You're my sister in Christ now," and she goes, "What?
Sister?
That's weird." Okay, so she's still learning it all, but she was
Yeah.
just like, "Okay, Dad."
Oh, I love
So,
that. though.
sure, but she's in the family. Eli's in the family, and so we're so excited, very proud.
Yeah.
I'm
It's
so
gonna be
thankful.
special. I know.
Yes. So
Life
it's going to be
moment.
so exciting. So we'll put those pictures up for you to see. But we're excited. So today we're going to be talking about what grace looks like. All right. So grace in our circumstances. So whatever circumstance you're dealing with today, and showing grace, grace in your own life. I don't know.
Yeah.
But also showing people grace that you may feel like, I don't know how to give them grace in that moment. Cause I know I definitely dealt with that.
Yeah.
And sometimes still do. So,
Yeah.
so tell me a little bit more as you were studying for grace, what popped up for you?
This is a hard one, and I feel like it flows with forgiveness.
Yeah,
is that
it's true.
We're shown grace, so we are to show grace. You know, I feel like our grace that is given to us is free, whereas the grace we give out is something to be learned. I know me, I've had to definitely sanctify myself in grace. I'm a lot more grace-filled today, grace-giving, than I was years ago.
Yeah.
Walking through this.
Okay.
There was one quote, Max Lucado, who I love. He said, "The difference between mercy and grace, mercy gave the prodigal son a second chance, grace gave him a feast." And I love that because I've had to grace John through a lot.
Yeah.
And there was moments and I was like, I'm not giving you another chance. I'm done, you know. But grace after grace after grace. And I praise God for grace because of where we are. And there's actually a Burning Man. I need to put that on, Jorian, but it's a Burning Man sculpture. And it's two grown humans that are faced away in anger, sadness, bitterness, whatever. But the children inside have their hands up to each other. And I just know through everything John went through, it was so much from his childhood or just things he hadn't dealt with. And I'm like, this is this little boy inside crying out. And as I say with forgiveness, who am I to not grace him?
Yeah.
And I understand there is also a point that grace is you've given enough grace in the circumstance of reconciliation.
Okay.
So I think that's also a big part to touch on or just there
Yeah.
it is. But yeah, grace for others, but also like Katie said, and I've said many times on this, is grace yourself. You're in a place you've never been.
Yeah.
Grace yourself in every circumstance. Grace yourself every day as you're dealing with anxiety and forgiveness and trust. Grace yourself.
Yeah.
Because that's hard.
Yeah.
I'm very hard on myself. So that was one that really spoke to me. It's probably why I reiterated a lot, because I'm not good at gracing myself. I'm better at gracing other people, but not me.
I'd say that's probably true for myself.
Yeah.
I'm not saying.
Yeah.
You are. Yeah.
You know that.
Yeah. You know that.
She knows me
Truth.
well. Yeah.
No, I have this image, when talking about grace, and like you said, it does kind of goes back and forth with forgiveness, but I just see, the nailed hands.
Yep.
That Jesus died on the cross for me. Whenever thinking about grace, that's like the first thing I think of when that word comes up. And so when he died on that cross and he took our sins, and he's saying, I'm showing you grace in this moment, and forgive them, for they know not what they do, but I'm showing you grace. You deserve hell.
Yep.
You don't deserve me being up on this cross, but I am going to grace you with my presence, come to the earth, and I'm going to show you grace by dying on the cross. So I see his nail-scarred hands. I do. Every time that word grace, when we first talked about grace as a topic, that's the first thing that I thought of. And there has to be something to that, meaning that, Katie, who are you to not show grace to Adam, to not show grace to your children when they're driving you crazy? Who are you to not show grace to them when I've shown you the ultimate grace by letting you live with me forever and forgiving you of my sins? So who are you as you're listening to this podcast? It might be something you're dealing with addiction. Obviously, that's the big thing that we talk about. You have a loved one that's walking through addiction, and you've walked a long road. You've walked a painful road. But I challenge you to find that image of the nailed hands of Jesus, and say, who are you to not show grace to your loved one? But that comes with some of the other stuff that we've talked about. Yes, you can show grace, but you still need to set a boundary.
That's exactly right. Yeah.
You can show grace to them, but that doesn't mean that you don't need to work on yourself. You've shown grace to them, but that doesn't mean that you don't need to separate yourself from them.
Yep.
Right?
Yeah.
The boundary, in other words. So it's tricky when you're talking about living in this world and living in this, but ultimately, showing grace when you don't want to is sometimes really, really difficult.
Yeah.
But it's important because God has shown us grace.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah. And it goes back to Amazing Grace, the song, the old hymnal.
About sung it.
Yes, go for it.
No,
please.
We talked about me singing a song, but I'm not
Double
going to
dare
do
you.
it.
No peer pressure here.
No. Jorian's like, do it.
I know. We're waiting on it.
Go for
I'll
it.
grace you right now, okay? But Amazing Grace,
Yeah.
how sweet the sound that saved a wretch like me.
Yeah.
And there's so many days that I want to hold John to something, and I'm like, who are you to hold him? Just like you said. But I think that's also come with sanctification and knowing God better, because it's that conviction of like, who are you to hold him in contempt for this when I've graced you for so much? You've hurt people, you've failed, you've lied, you've cheated. And who am I to hold him against that? I was actually talking to Melissa, who was on the podcast with the counseling stuff, and she said there's actually and I forget what she calls it, but there's a chair method, and you actually say there's two chairs, and I would put John in one, and issue in the other. Separate him. Because he stole, that doesn't mean that he's a thief. Because he used drugs, that doesn't mean that he is. Separate them. And I love that because in my eyes, that is gracing them. I'm going to separate you from your sin.
Right.
And I'm going to love you who you are right here. Not what the world may claim that you are, but you right here.
Yeah.
I love that.
That's
She uses that in therapy. And I was like, that is so good. Even anxiety, which is the last episode, is separate that. Hey, I have anxiety, but I'm not anxiety. That is not who I am.
Yeah, I love that.
So in those moments where you're struggling to, grace your husband or your whoever, spouse, daughter, son, it's like separate them in that chair.
Yeah.
This is their addiction, but this is them.
Yeah. It's not who they are. Yeah. Well, and this is kind of getting a little off topic, but it's
okay.
It's fine. Something that S2L, which is the organization, the rehab that we're partnered with, S2L Recovery. That is what they teach. They are not who
That's right.
the addict that they are. So a lot of times, different organizations, you have to announce yourself as the addict, and that's how you're known. Because they think that that's some sort of like, hi, I'm Katie and I'm an addict or whatever. And they say, no, like that is not who you are. You are completely saved by grace.
That's right.
Right?
Yeah.
You're completely forgiven. I am no longer that person, but I am new and I'm clean.
Yeah.
So I don't identify as that. I don't identify as that anxious person.
Yeah.
I don't identify as the thief or the addict or whatever it may be in your circumstance, but or your loved one's circumstance.
Yeah.
And so separating, I love that analogy, but separating the two and say, God has shown them grace. You need to show them grace as well.
It's so good. And so many times, because we're very honest here. We talk about it. When I'm struggling with gracing someone or like my husband, my first prayer is, God, give me eyes to see them. Because so many times when I'm struggling to grace, I can't see what they're struggling with. I can't see their thoughts. We are so completely different than every human being. God made us so uniquely that I have to pray for God's eyes. Like, let me see. And so many times, I don't know if I've shared this before, but I thought I was miscarrying. I've had multiple miscarriages. And John's anger is not an emotion. It's a reaction to emotion. John gets angry when he's scared. I was struggling gracing him. I'm like, are you like, I'm going through this and you have the angry, just the feeling, the tone. And God showed me he is scared to death. And I went to him and I said, humbled myself, of course, because I did not want to grace in that moment. And I said, you're scared to death, aren't you? And he just lost it. He said, I'm scared to death. Oh. I've never been through this. I can't help you. I want to fix it. He said, there is nothing I can do. But God showed me what he was dealing with, where I could grace him. And it humbled my heart because I could then see how scared he was, like a little boy, versus the angry man of that facade that he had put up.
That's beautiful.
So God will show you. When you're struggling to grace, be like, God, I need you to show me what they're struggling with.
I love that.
Give me your eyes.
Yeah, I have to be constantly reminded in parenting too.
Yes. Yeah.
I know. We try to teach our children what grace is, right? Like I said, they're both believers now, but they're young. So they haven't seen a lot of the world yet. But so we're teaching them grace. And I know when they deserve a bigger punishment than we give out, we teach them, I'm showing you grace in this moment. You deserve this punishment, the worst kind of punishment. But we're going to choose to forgive and show you grace, just like Christ showed grace on the cross.
It's so good.
Right? And so just pointing them back to what God's done and what he's done in our lives. Yeah. And so I've taught that some and used grace in parenting as well.
Because what a precious lesson to learn as a child,
I know.
Where you're raised in grace and you know what that is. It's even, go into your child and be like, Jasper, I'm really sorry. Like, I did this or, and gracing, where we learn that from littles versus getting older. And,
I know.
There was another it's been a big lesson to me through this, but I also work with all my girls, is when they get out of the program also, it comes with a lot of grace. And
Yeah.
you're going to see a lot of my girls are like, oh, I saw this behavior, or, his
thing.
glow wasn't the same, or, and I went through all of that. But I also learned that they're learning to be the new man that God has created them. A lot of them are baby Christians. A lot of them are walking into the calling and the warrior that God's called them to be. And it comes with a lot of grace when they come home of, I see this little old behavior of like a tone or whatever it may be, but this is not you. You're walking through this. And so, because in the beginning, I would just almost crumble when I would see, oh my goodness, here it goes. Here, it's just going to all
He's
backslide.
relapsing.
Yep,
I
everything's
know.
happening.
Yeah.
And so in those moments, grace, and be like, I see you. I mean, and that's been a time for John and I, and how amazing it is to watch him, how he handles situations today.
Yeah.
Like Katie knows this, how he handles it today versus years ago.
It's so good.
But it took a lot of grace on my part to, and don't get me wrong, John has to grace me all the time too.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
I'm
It
not
goes
perfect
both
at all.
ways.
It
Yeah.
goes both ways. And that's what a relationship is gracing, because we are broken, sinful human beings.
Yeah.
Period.
Period. Point blank.
Period.
So you had mentioned earlier when we first started, gracing others is one thing, but gracing yourself. What does that look like for you? And when you say that, because I'm like trying to think how I do it, it's a different perspective. So I'm curious to know what you were thinking when you were writing those down.
That's been a big lesson.
Yeah.
I am very hard on myself. I'm a perfectionist that comes out of my father leaving when I was little.
Yeah.
I've been working through that for a while. We actually just had friends, and something had happened, and I had sent this apology, and they're like, are you serious right now? It was something I said. I overthink. And one of them said to John, she is really hard on herself, isn't she? And I'm like, I am. So all of this I learned when I saw that walking through addiction. All of this was new to me. So anxiety, I would be hard on myself for that. Like, you shouldn't be worrying right now. You shouldn't be, or I'm trying to think of so many examples, but just grace yourself. I would pick on myself and beat up on myself for feeling a certain way.
Yeah.
I'm like, it's okay. You've never been here. It is okay. Grace yourself.
I love that. That's a good reminder.
And that's, because none of us have ever been here, ever. And so it is that, be gentle with yourself, love yourself in this. Like, just, Katie and I always talk about, take care of yourself.
Yeah.
Grace yourself the way that Jesus does with you.
Yeah. That's such a good reminder. And I'll be honest with you. I just have not, I mean, I know that we need to grace ourselves, but it's just something I've not really ever thought about. So I appreciate you bringing that to light, because these people, and I know, like, we talk a lot about taking care of ourselves in the midst of the trial of, especially your loved one being addicted, because so often we forget about ourselves. And so we harp on that a lot, because we're so focused on our loved one. But it's the gracing yourselves, because you've never been in this position. I think that's so powerful, to show yourself grace in this moment. If you're listening and you're just like so deep into it, your loved one's addicted to something. Maybe they're fresh into rehab. Maybe they're fresh out of rehab. I think what she's saying is so important to really, to grasp, to give yourself grace. What does that look like? And don't beat yourself up for the way that you're feeling. Don't beat yourself up for the angry thoughts maybe that you're feeling against your loved one. Being like, I know I shouldn't think these things, and I'm so mad at myself. Grace yourself.
Yep. It's normal.
It's normal, because I know that I beat myself up. And had I had somebody speak that truth into me, I think that would have been very helpful. And so reiterating, taking care of yourself, that's going to help show that grace to yourself. Go get a pedicure, go get a manicure, go get your hair done, go work out, do something for yourself that can kind of take your mind off of the things that are going on.
Yeah,
So.
it's so good. That's some of my women, they don't, when their husbands, boyfriends, whatever go off, wives, the first couple of days, they're like, I'm just struggling. Like, I can't do anything. And I tell them, that is okay.
Yeah, don't.
You have been so all consumed, not sleeping, whatever. Sit in that house. Enjoy the peace right now. Grace yourself. Because I think us as women, especially, we feel, I know I'm a worker bee. Like, I'm all the time Goes back to perfectionism all the time. John's like, you never sit still. I was like, I don't, but I feel like that's my, and so give yourself the space and the room to sit and be.
I love that.
If you need to sleep for 2 days because you haven't slept for 6 months, do it. Grace yourself, give yourself the freedom and the space to be and to heal in the ways that you need.
That's so good. I love that.
And that's a hard one.
It's a hard one, but it's just so good. I just feel like, I don't know. I just feel like I hope. Did you have anything else?
No, no. That was just the other thing. Grace in the Bible, like we talked about in the last podcast. Yeah. It's everywhere.
It's everywhere.
Everywhere.
Grace is everywhere.
Because God knew that we would need it and that we would struggle with it.
He gave us the ultimate grace. So yeah, I just think that's so good. And I hope that you found something from this episode that encouraged you to find grace in the circumstance. Giving grace is one thing, and it's very important because God gave us the ultimate grace. But gracing yourself, I think that's just so beautiful. And I love that you brought that up. So I hope that you found that encouragement to grace yourself. We hope you enjoyed this episode. If you're watching this on YouTube, give us a like, a subscribe, share it to others that are hurting. We hear of people all the time that said, I've never dealt with addiction, but I've listened to your podcast and I got something from that. So and even this episode of Grace, if somebody's really struggling just with other things, have them listen to this episode. And I just really feel like this might be an encouragement to them just to find grace in whatever they're going through. You can find us on our socials, Instagram, Facebook, Hope After Addiction. We love feedback. We love if there's something we have not covered, to private message us saying, hey, I'm really dealing with this, or I think this might be really helpful for one of my friends. This is where we get some of our topics. So we hope you have a great day and a great week, and we'll see you next week.